Before Jesus of Nazareth raised Lazarus from the dead, he prayed. But he did not pray the way you were taught, and he certainly did not pray the way most modern believers are prepared to hear. What he did in those agonizing moments outside the tomb, the OXO method. The internal posture, the unseen doorway he walked through before the power moved that specific mechanism, was removed from our modern understanding, not lost. Removed. The words he spoke are still printed in the pages of your Bible. But the practice, the ancient technology of the soul that made those words alive and kinetic, that was deliberately excised. If you have ever bowed your head in the dark, whispering into the void, and felt like something fundamental was missing, if you have ever felt like you were merely repeating hollow scripts that no longer carry the weight they once did, you are not imagining it. You are remembering. This revelation is not for everyone. If you have come here simply to have your current religious habits affirmed, this documentary will deeply unsettle you. But if you have always sensed that the way that Christ moved through the physical world was not just a matter of blind belief, but a profound, replicable method, then you have arrived exactly where you need to be. Because what we are about to decode will shatter everything you thought prayer was, and once you see the architecture of this hidden truth, you can never unsee it. Let us start with the fragile illusion you were given. From childhood, you were taught that prayer is a dialogue that functions like a monologue. You were taught to talk at God, to ask, to request, to confess, to thank. And when the night grew dark enough to plead, you were told that if you prayed hard enough, if you manufactured enough emotional sincerity, then perhaps the creator of the cosmos would intervene, but only if it was his will, only if you deserved it. So you prayed, and when the heavens remained silent, you were handed theological excuses. God said no, or you lacked faith, or his ways are higher. Over centuries, prayer devolved into a cosmic wish list, a ritual of begging performed by good Christians hoping someone was listening on the other side of the ceiling. But look closely at the historical texts. Look at the actual anatomy of the miraculous. Jesus never asked God to change his mind. He was not trying to persuade the Father. Go back to the miracles. Not to worship them blindly, but to dissect them as a spiritual scientist. Look at the precise sequence of events. Right before the manifestation of power, when he fed the 5,000, the gospel states he took the loaves, looked up to heaven, and then the multiplication occurred. When he walked on water, Matthew 14 records that he went up on the mountain alone to pray, in absolute silence, before he defied the laws of physics. But the ultimate clue lies at the tomb of Lazarus. John 11:41 says, "He lifted his eyes and said, 'Father, I thank you that you have heard me.'" Stop there. Analyze the grammar. He thanked the Father for already hearing him. Before the stone was rolled away, before the dead man took a breath, before there was any empirical evidence that reality had shifted, he gave thanks in the past tense, as if the impossible had already been accomplished. If prayer is begging God to do something in the future, this makes absolutely no sense. You do not thank someone for a gift they have not yet given. You only speak in the past tense about a future event if you have entered a state where the illusion of time has collapsed, a state where the separation between what is and what will be ceases to exist. Jesus entered a specific location. But where was it? Where did he enter? In Matthew 6-6, Jesus gives the most explicit, yet universally misunderstood, instruction on the mechanics of prayer. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is in secret. For generations, the institutional church has taught this as practical advice about privacy. Do not be a hypocrite, pray in your bedroom. But look at the original Koine Greek. The word translated as room is Tameion. In the ancient Near East, the Tameion was not a bedroom. It was the innermost chamber of a house. It was the storehouse, the treasury, a room built without windows, located at the absolute center of the dwelling, designed to be completely cut off from the light and noise of the outside streets. Jesus was not giving architectural advice. He was providing a metaphysical coordinate. He is saying, when you pray, go inward. Retreat into the windowless treasury of your own soul, the space that exists beneath your personality, beneath your anxieties, beneath your ego and your identity. Close the door. Seal off the five senses. Shut out the chatter of the analytical mind. Why? Because the Father does not live in the external noise. He lives in the Tameion. He dwells in the secret center. Every healing, every raising of the dead, followed this exact sequence. Inward retreat, alignment, absolute silence, and then power. He withdrew to the mountains, not to rest his physical body, but to realign his frequency. Power does not originate in the outer world. It emanates from the inner room. Here is the great secret that the apocryphal and mystical traditions guarded with their lives. Prayer is not persuasion. Prayer is coherence. Jesus did not beg God to heal. He entered the Tameion, closed the door to the illusion of separation, and aligned his will so perfectly with the source that the two became indistinguishable. In John 14:10, he reveals the physics of this union. The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does his works. He was not the initiator. He was the conduit, the clear, unobstructed lens through which the divine light could burn into the physical world. But this requires passing through the door of silence. If the instruction was so precise, why were you never taught how to do it? Why, in 2 millennia of Christian history, has a tactile, practical method been reduced to a poetic metaphor? We must look to the 4th century. When Christianity was absorbed by the Roman Empire, it transformed from a mystical, underground practice into a state-sponsored institution. Institutions require order. They require scale. They require systems that can be managed, measured, and controlled. You cannot systematize. Silence. You cannot standardize the Tameion. You cannot tax or regulate a person's direct, internal access to the divine. If the masses learned that the power of the Christ was accessible not through the mediation of a priest, but through the mastery of their own inner stillness, the entire hierarchy would collapse. Free people do not need mediators. And so, the method was quietly separated from the message. The words were preserved, but the how was moved into the shadows. It was kept alive only by the desert fathers and mothers of Egypt, who practiced Hesychasm, the profound, mystical tradition of inner stillness. They knew that thinking about God is infinitely different from encountering God. But to the masses, the church offered rituals, liturgies, written prayers that could be recited from the throat up, while the mind wandered in anxiety. Today, we see the tragic culmination of this historical theft. Millions of sincere, devoted people sitting in bowing their heads, repeating words, begging the sky to intervene, while the door to the inner room remains locked. Not because God locked it, but because the institution forgot where the key was buried, and society taught you to be terrified of the silence required to find it. We live in an era of hyperstimulation. Your phone, your screens, your media, they are all designed to keep you locked entirely outside the room. The moment you realize that the gap between you and the miraculous is not a lack of worthiness, but a lack of technique, everything shifts. Technique can be learned. The ancient alchemy can be recovered. Your soul already knows the way. It has simply been buried under decades of religious conditioning. You want to know how to enter? You want the steps? I will give you the threshold, but you must be the one to cross it. First, you must cease the monologue. Stop talking to God in your head. Stop treating the divine like a cosmic vending machine that requires the currency of your begging. Sit. Be entirely still. Close your physical eyes to shut the first gate. Do not recite anything. Just breathe. With every exhale, consciously evict the noise. Evict the memory of yesterday. Evict the anxiety of tomorrow. Evict the version of you that needs something, fears something, or wants to prove something. Feel for the profound, terrifying silence that exists behind your thoughts. You will not see a burning bush. You will likely not hear a booming voice. But if you endure the initial discomfort of your ego screaming for distraction, if you stay at the threshold long enough without demanding a performance from God, you will feel it. A resonance, a presence that is not separate from you, but is the very ground of your being, closer than your jugular vein, closer than your next breath. That is the edge of the Tameion. Do not force the door. Just Remain there. You are unlearning a lifetime of external striving. You are learning what it feels like to simply be in the presence of the Source, stripped of your human identity. This is only the beginning. It is the necessary foundation, because there is a second layer to this mystery. There is a specific movement of awareness that Jesus engaged in after he entered the Silenza shift, an identity that transformed quiet alignment into staggering authority. The mechanism that allowed him to speak as the Father, not just to the Father, but that instruction cannot be comprehended by a mind that is still addicted to noise. Practice the stillness. Enter the room. The Father, who sees in secret, is already there. He has been waiting for 2,000 years for you to finally stop talking and remember how to listen.